It's a real pleasure today for me to introduce our speaker. I had the privilege of introducing him to this club 24 years ago, almost to the day. He's done a super job. Our speaker was born in New York City. His father worked for an oil company, and he grew up in many locations like Indonesia, Somalia, and upstate New York. He got his BS degree in engineering from Worcester Technical College in Worcester, Massachusetts, and he has his MS degree from the University of Florida in civil engineering. He served 20 years in the U.S. Army with the Corps of Engineers. His last assignment was 4 years in St. Louis. He was a district engineer chief. And prior to that, he served in Fort Carson, Boulder, Colorado, Central America, El Salvador, and Germany. Upon retiring in 1993, he accepted a position as the executive director of the Red River Valley Association. And let me tell you about that. I was on the committee. The association had done a national search for someone to come in and lead the association. And we had a meeting it was actually in Texarkana, and 5 of us on the search committee. We interviewed several prospective people, and Rich Brontoli came in, and we told him what we expected out of our next executive director. And he said, well, I think I can help you. And he reached in his briefcase and pulled out about a 3-page list of bullet points of things that he thought he could do to help the Red River Valley Association. When he left the room, we just put our pencils down and said, this is our man. Now let's design a package to get him to Shreveport. So he's been here 24 years, and we're really glad to have him here. He'll tell you more about the association in his talk, but one thing that he does, he works with our congressional delegation in Washington to secure funds to maintain the river. And I have been with him on a number of occasions to Washington, and finally I had to get to the point to say I'm not going again, because typically we start at 7 o'clock in the morning. At 8:30 we're on the Hill. We're knocking on the senator or the representative's doors. He knows all the staff people. We have some very good meetings. We do take a few minutes and have lunch, and then at 5 o'clock you think you go home. No, you go to a cocktail party, and then at 8 o'clock you go out to dinner, and you get back in your room around 11 o'clock. So if he ever asks you to go to Washington with him, just tell him no. And he does a number of things he's done for this association, and we're really glad to have him there. He's integrated himself in the community, and he's very active in what we call the Square and Round Dancing Club. He serves as their treasurer. He's also, of course, as we know, an incoming president for this club, and he resides in Bossier City with his wife, Syl. Syl is of a German ancestry, and if you ever have a chance, and she says she's going to make spatzels, which is a German Alsatian pasta type food. She makes the best ones in the world. And they have 2 children. Matthew, the youngest, graduate of Louisiana Tech, working for a gaming company in Dallas now, and Lydia, graduated from LSU and is an architect in Houston with her husband. So help me welcome Rich Brontoli.
Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate that. And Jerry was on my board. He was the vice president for Louisiana. And the one thing he didn't mention about the interview is I went in there. We had a vice president from Arkansas, Lynn Lowe. And they, if you remember in those days, there was an advertisement, but when they said, where are you from? I said, well, originally New York City. And he goes, New York City? You remember that sauce, that thing? And I went, well, I don't have this job. But anyway, they gave it to me. It is a pleasure and an opportunity to let you all know what our association does. And I intend to show you our mission and a lot of major projects going on in the Red River Valley. Let's see, in this one here, okay. We are a nonprofit member-supported organization. We're formed in 1925 here in Shreveport. 4 state chambers got together and said we need to bring navigation back to the Red River. We do water resource projects in all 4 states. I'm going to show you some examples of those. I have a board members from all 4 states. Our federal partners are the Corps of Engineers, Coast Guard, NRCS, which is Ag, USGS, Bureau of Reclamation. We work at the federal level. Those are the projects we work on. We coordinate with our federal delegation. And what we try to do is justify to them why they need to support the projects, not just go say we need it, but give them backup data why they're good projects. And it's up to them to get the funds to the federal agencies. I do not take any federal or state funds. We just try to get the federal budget to appropriate to the agency that's responsible for a project. We communicate with the communities, coordinate to identify issues and decide with them what are the best options for resolution. And really, it's all about relationships, whether you're dealing locally or up at Washington, D.C. That's basically what we do. Let me start at the bottom of the river here. The main one everybody's aware of here is the J. Bennett Johnston waterway from the Mississippi up to the I-220 bridge. We do have 5 lock-in dams on the Red River. And we have our partners for the Red River. The Corps of Engineers maintains the navigation channel to 9 feet. They operate and maintain the 5 lock-in dams. They maintain the dikes and revetments that pertain to the navigation channel. The Coast Guard puts in the buoys. They do all the aids to navigation. Any accidents they would investigate or any oil spills, they'd be responsible to respond with the companies. The Red River Waterway Commission, who I get mixed up with a lot, and I just tell people I am not the dog park. That's the Red River Waterway Commission. They work off of property tax millage from 7 parishes along the river. That's how they get funded. And they are the local sponsor for the navigation project with the Corps of Engineers. The 5 public ports, but I will mention we have private terminals, and the biggest one that produces the most tonnage on the river is the Clico Power Plant at Boyce, just north of Alexandria. They built a $1 billion addition to their plant. They put a off-barge loading facility in an oxbow. They bring 100% of their fuel, over 2 million tons of coal in every year, and they conveyor it 1.5 miles from that oxbow to their plant. So they are the biggest user of the waterway. And then navigation committee, I formed a navigation committee in '96 when the last lock-in dam was completed. And we work with all the partners and industry to make sure the river remains safe, reliable, and efficient. So that's what, and we meet at least twice a year or during emergencies or high water. And we self-regulate ourselves to ensure we don't have any accidents and everybody's safe. I just want to point out to you, a lot of people think the Red River flows into the Mississippi. Well, it doesn't. This is the Red River here. This is called the Old River Lock and Control Structure. There's actually a lock right here. You come in from the Red and lock to the Mississippi. This is a control structure. The Corps of Engineers tries to keep the Mississippi from becoming the Atchafalaya. They pass 1/3 of the flow of the Mississippi into the Red River. Up here about 34 miles is the Washita River that goes through Monroe, Washita Black. So they're actually a tributary of the Red. So the Washita, this old river, overflow and the Red River becomes the Atchafalaya, 100%. So we do not actually flow. We used to flow into the Mississippi, but not anymore. The Corps tries to prevent that. So that's just interesting fact. A lot of people don't realize what happens down in that area. And that's actually near Simmsport. Okay, let me go through some of these projects up the river. Navigation system, we have the 5 lock and dams. Basically, a lock and dam is the dam part that holds the water back, keeps the river minimum of 9-foot draft for the barges. You have the lock, which is a water elevator. So the boat goes in, they gravity feed the water into the lock, it rises and goes off, or the other way going downstream. It goes down, it's just a water elevator. They have a series of revetments and dikes up and down the whole system. You've seen those. The purpose of those is to channel the river so it's self-scouring and we do not have to dredge as much. And they are actually very efficient, we found over the years. There's very few areas between the lock and dams that they have to dredge. They basically dredge at the locks where the river slows down or below Lock 1 where it's open depending on the Mississippi level. Recreation, there's 20 recreation sites. They were built 50% government, Corps of Engineers, 50% Red River Waterway Commission. When they were completed, the Red River Waterway Commission takes 100% ownership and they do all the O&M forever. The government has nothing to do with it anymore. So all the rec sites, the Bossier, Arthur Teague, the Stoner Launch are all operated and maintained by the Red River Waterway Commission. Then I also want to note is we do have a Red River Wildlife Refuge, National Wildlife Refuge. Their headquarters is just out of Bossier City, and they also have a visitor center there, very interesting visitor center. If you haven't been there, I encourage you to go to that. But what's interesting is we got together a whole bunch of industry and environmental folks, and we laid out what I would call economic corridors, I-49, any ports, any cities. These are where we're going to have economic development, and they agreed, and they buy their wildlife refuge outside our economic development zones. So that worked very well together. We all work together, and it proves when you do work together, a lot of good things can happen. Okay, that's basically, we're at a 9-foot, our initiative right now is to go from a 9-foot to a 12-foot authorized channel. Why do we want to do that? Right now, a barge only loads to 9 feet. Barges were made, they can load to 12 feet. If you put an extra 3 foot per barge, and right now, a lock and dam will take 6 barges with its tow, pushing tow at one time through the lock. If we go to 12 feet, those 6 barges would carry the equivalent of 8 barges of commodity. Same tow, you drastically reduce the cost per ton of that commodity. So waterborne transportation is the only competition to long-haul rail. We know when Lock and Dam 5 was completed in 95, rail rates dropped in the Shreveport-Bossier area to meet water. We do not bring very little sand and gravel to Caddo-Bossier by water. It's all done by unit trains because they've reduced their prices to beat water. If we ever did away with the waterway or closed it down, rail rates would go sky high. And that's why we need, one of the benefits of having a waterway is competition for transportation costs. Over 90% of the waterway, and every year the Corps does surveys of the whole river, is 12 foot or greater naturally. It's just around the lock and dams and below Lock 1. So the Corps last year told Congress they agreed that it would be a good project, it's something to study. We now need Congress to tell them, because we can't have earmarks, Congress can't say, go ahead and study it, that's an earmark. They've told the Corps, well, since you think it's a good idea, go ahead and study it. So our next step is to get it authorized. We've communicated with industry and a lot of the economic development organizations of the whole river to submit to our delegation a request to get it in the next authorization bill, which we believe will be at the end of this year. It's called the WRDA bill, Water Resource Development Act. So that's our next step. Once you get in that, you got to get appropriated funds to fund the study. But you got to do one step at a time. Okay, moving up the river, we had an irrigation project in North Caddo. It's called Red Bayou Irrigation Project. The partners were NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service. They had this project on the shelf. We'd been pushing it for a while. And when the stimulus came out that 1 year after President Obama came in, the big stimulus, they said, well, great, you got a project. They put in the federal funds. The state had to come up with 1.1 million. The timing was amazing. The state had the money. They gave it. That would never happen today, we don't think. But it was just, there was money in a certain pot that they were able to provide. So 17,600 acres of land can be irrigated off of that bayou. The farmers are responsible to do their own laterals off the bayou. They do have once the project was done, it was turned over to the Red Bayou Irrigation District run by the local farmers and interests, and they do all the operation and maintenance. They collect funds by the farmers or whoever uses the water out of that bayou pays for the water, and that's how they fund to keep it maintained. Now, it's only used for supplemental irrigation. June, July, and August, when you might have a drought, you need some water to keep your cotton growing or your corn. They use it for what they call supplemental irrigation, not year-round. And I will note that down here, where the end of the bayou goes right back into 12-mile bayou, so any of the water not used passing through the system goes back into 12-mile bayou into the Red River, and it comes out of the Red River up here by a pump. They have pumps in the Red River, and they pump the water into the bayou when they need it. And then they have a series of weirs to hold the water, and it's actually enhanced the wildlife and fishery of that bayou and the actual recreation value and wildlife habitat value. I will tell you, you'll see in a little bit, the Red River has a high chloride. You might have heard a lot of salt. It's a high chloride. It is high chloride, except when you get down here, it's been diluted quite a bit. But what these farmers do with NRCS is they test their soils every year to make sure that's irrigated doesn't accumulate salt and chloride. But we get enough rain, like you're seeing now, to leach out any chlorides that might accumulate during irrigation. So that's been very successful. And what we're trying to do is use that in other places along the Red River, that type of project. We do have a study, active study, the Corps of Engineers, to look at navigation into Arkansas. It'd be 3 lock and dams. Like I said, the J. Bennett Johnson goes to the I-220 bridge. The next dam, lock and dam, would be near Benton area, right in that area. And then 2 in Arkansas, that would push navigation up to the basically Oklahoma line up there by the Index Bridge. So we're in the middle of that study. The Corps has contracted a company out of Baton Rouge that does this for a living, and they have already interviewed over 45 companies that might have use of a navigation. And what they do is they analyze how are you transporting your goods coming in or going out, rail or truck, could you use water? What's the savings if we had navigation? They calculate what the savings would be, $1, $2 a ton, times the number of tons they would move, and that would become your benefits. The 3 lock and dams and all the dikes and revetments that go in between and all the improvements, bank stabilization, for the 3 lock and dams would probably be in the neighborhood of $1 billion project. 10, 15 years ago, that sounded like a lot. It really doesn't sound like a lot these days when they throw trillions of dollars around or hundreds of billions of dollars, but that's what that project would be. And so we hope by the end of this year, early next year, we'll know whether there's enough benefits to justify a project. We have an authorized project to rehab levees. I will tell you that the Caddo and Bossier levees are the absolute best levees in the Red River. They're to federal standards. They're maintained in an excellent manner. Those levee districts, those 2 are excellent. They've recently both got certified by FEMA. that they're the highest certification for insurance. But Arkansas is a different story. Those poor guys, you can see that top, they got trees. That's a good picture. Usually they got trees in the middle of their levees. They just don't have the money because all those levees are pretty much ag levees, and they don't protect much but agriculture property, and you don't get much tax off of ag land. So we do have an authorized federal project. They've succeeded in rehabbing all of the levees in Miller County. They started on Lafayette County, but without the earmarks, the administration has not funded continuing this project until since the no earmark ban. So right now we're sort of keep trying to get money for it, but we haven't been able to. Another project that's authorized is bank stabilization from I-220 bridge all the way up through Arkansas, stabilizing the banks, because you know there's a lot of cave-in. You see the river come back down. You can see the silt that comes down. We're the highest silt river in the nation, and it's all from bank caving between Oklahoma, Texas, and Arkansas. But we try to prioritize which ones are done by threatened utilities, power poles, or structures, bridges, so that we at least get those protected and agencies or states don't have to go in and rebuild those if the river takes them out. Because up above Shreveport, it's a natural river. It's meandering. It's going to do what it wants to do. So we try to keep the politics out and prioritize these projects by priority of threat. There's two ways that they do it. One is called trench fill. You come off the river, you build a trench in the dry, you put in all this stone, and when the river eats its way there, the stone launches itself, and you have a bank stabilization. The other one is a series of dikes that stick out and push the river to the other side, and then you have a revetment on the other side to keep the bank stabilization. Those are the two basic type of projects that the Corps does for that. Okay, there are people that want to take navigation to Lake Texoma. Dallas-Fort Worth is one of the top 10 cities in the nation for population, for economic growth and all that. They are the only one in the top 10 that does not have a port. Even Tulsa, Oklahoma has a port on the Arkansas River. So there's a group, North Texas COG, Council of Governments, state legislators. We've had a number of briefings with them. My suggestion to them was, we don't know if that part of the river is even feasible to take locking dams or to be navigable. So we suggested they take $500,000, hire an engineer company to come in and do a survey and say, yes, it's feasible, or no, it's not. So they haven't done that yet, but that's basically what we would suggest. I think container on barge would be the only way to justify a project. You can imagine the number of containers that go into the Dallas-Fort Worth area and get them off the highway. And container on barge, here's the tow, until the last couple of years has not been on the waterway. It has not been something folks have taken the interest in, or companies. It is now becoming a lot more popular. They're designing barges to hold containers before they're just putting them in hopper barges. So I think in the future, that's going to be a big deal, is getting trucks off the highway, putting containers on barges. The one thing I didn't mention or show you a map, should have put in there, was the inland navigation system. When you get into Shreveport, you can get in and go get onto the Mississippi through River Lock. Then you can go south to New Orleans. You can go along the Intercoastal Waterway to Houston. You can go north to Chicago. You can go north, get on the Ohio River to Pittsburgh. There's a huge part of America, the Central America, that's serviced by inland waterway. So there would be a great benefit when container barge becomes serious. And this shows the Metroplex, but it's actually really, we all know if you've driven here, it's creeping up. Pretty soon it's going to be all the way to the Red River anyway, the Metroplex area. Okay, way out far west, west of Wichita Falls, west of Lugard Altus, Oklahoma. We have a chloride control project. 4,400 tons of salt get in the Red River every day. It's through underground springs. There used to be a huge, you can see Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, a big inland sea. And so this is not a winner in Wichita Falls. That's one of their tributaries of the salt that comes out and is in the tributaries to the Red. What they do, the Corps has done, is they have low flow dams, and when the concentration, it rains a lot, and the concentration of salt is low, they deflate, the dam deflates, pretty well done automatically. Pumps kick in and they pump that high concentration water to a reservoir, a brine reservoir, where they keep it, and it could evaporate, and they maintain, they don't let it get out from that reservoir. It stays in that area. When you have no flows, no rain, the dam inflates. And, well, I should say when it inflates, they pump it to the reservoir. When it deflates, because of the concentration is low, high water, it then gets back, it goes into the Red River system. This one happens to be on the Wichita River and eventually gets into the Red River. But that's been ongoing for a long time. Again, it's trying to get funding for it. The Corps of Engineers administration don't really consider it one of their priority missions. We've always had Oklahoma and Texas delegation get funding to keep that going. But that's what's going on there. Now there's an initiative There's an initiative with a private company to do solar ponds out there, that reservoir. They would use that footprint and take all that high concentrated salt and build solar ponds. You can see there's high concentration of salt on the bottom, and the sun heats it. It generates steam. It goes through a generator and produces power. Right now they're waiting for companies or any organization, they're working with the Air Force to buy their renewable energy, their power, and then their investors would give them the money to get started. So we're really hoping in the next year or so they can get some of these put in and show the benefit and the value that they actually work. So that's pretty exciting innovation that a private company, and they're not taking any federal funds, they want to do it all on private funding. Okay, I want to talk real quick about the flood, 2015-2016 flood. Where the water falls makes a difference. 2015 flood, all the rains were up in Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. As a matter of fact, we're in such a drought, all the reservoirs in Texas, Oklahoma, out there, were only 10-15% full. After the rains of 2015, they were over 100% full. They got up to 40 inches of rain. They were going over emergency spillways. And that's what we got, but it all came funneling, channeling down. If you think about it, all the rain in Bossier goes into Flat River, Red Chute, and goes down into the Red River, Loggy Bayou, which is south of Lock and Dam 5. Anything on the Shreveport side that's west of 12 Mile Bayou gets into those bayous and doesn't come into the Red until down by Natchitoches. So where it falls matters. In 2015, it was all up north, so it was a Red River flood. The only folks really flooded were those that were between the levees and back up of 12 Mile Bayou. The 2016 was a local flood where it was more on the land side, the protected side of the levees. The bayous just couldn't handle that volume of water. It really wasn't a Red River flood. So we're always looking north to see how the Red River is going to be affected. What happened in 2015 was, it's compared to the 1990 flood. This is 1990, the flows. Here's the flows in 2015. So we had less flows than 1990, but the crests, here was the crest in 1990, and the crests were higher. So how do you have lower flows and higher crests? Well, something's wrong. So we created a technical committee. I'm the chair. We have the parishes, the cities, you can see who's members, the levee districts, port, waterway commission, watershed management institute at LSUS, and all the Homeland Security folks that have to react. We've completed documentation of the high water, what was the high water mark on the levees in 2015, and the parishes and cities have put in new ordinances that says you have to build to that high water mark plus 1.5 feet. The Corps initiated a $1.5 million hydraulic and sediment survey to be completed hopefully early next year. They still got to do some LIDAR and some river surveys. FEMA needs this data because the base flood elevations that you're told to build your homes at are way out of date. That was proven that the BFEs from they haven't done any updates since 1990, and the insurance maps. So they got to have this core data to update those. And it's our job as the committee to look at all this, analyze it, and tell the community leaders what is the risk in the future, what can happen in the future. And then we need every 5 years to force the federal agencies to update their maps, update their data, so we have accurate projections when we do have a flood. Just to give you an idea, we know there's 2 reasons for it. The first one is siltation. This is by Jimmy Davis Bridge, all those dikes they put in, well, they silt behind the dikes, you get trees growing up, vegetation, you lose your flood storage. But Clyde Fant and Arthur Teague are not levees, okay? The levee for the Caddo side is 0.9 miles west of Clyde Fant. Well, the city and things have decided they put a wall in the 2015 flood. They don't want water because of all the construction. Well, that's fine, but if you don't let the water spread out, it's got to go up. So it's going to be a combination of why did we have 4 feet higher of water than what everybody thought in the 2015 flood. It's going to be a combination of siltation and urbanization, and that's what the core studies are going to show us. And then we need to get with the leadership community and decide what risk are you willing to take. Continue construction, make some changes, and that's what the intent of this committee is. That is the main projects and issues on the river. I have a 30-minute thing on just that flooding in 2015-16. There's a lot that goes on the Red River, and I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm glad Jerry got me here. It's been exciting and a very rewarding job being a part of the water resources and dealing with people in all 4 states. I'll just say, you know, it's amazing. You drive, if you live in a city and you drive to another big city, you go through all these small towns, and you say, wow, oh my gosh, what do these people do? When you're dealing with levee boards and all that, you meet these people, and it is Americans are great. All those folks that, whether it's ag or industry, and I've got to meet a lot of them along the Red River in all our towns. So it's been very rewarding. Unless there's any questions, I think my time is about up. I didn't get a card.
Oh, we got one right here.
Oh, there it is, 3 minutes. 1 question, 2 questions, yes.
What do other states call bayous?
Creeks,
Creeks? Okay.
streams.
Are we the only ones that say bayous?
No, actually, Arkansas has a number of bayous.
Okay.
But you're right, it's creeks and streams are normally what other states call their smaller tributaries.
The Texoma program we're talking about, future obviously, but Texoma's not close to the DFW. How will they get it to there, or is that going to be the end of it?
That's the end of it. Yeah. Our lock-in dams are about 25-foot lift for 4 of them, and one's 35-foot lift that the boats have to go up or down. But yeah, Lake Texoma would be the end, but that's due north of Dallas, and all they got to do is they got 75, and there's a corridor right there that it could become their port.
What would that do to the traffic through here? Would just explode?
Usually about 100-mile impact of where your port is. Anything outside 100 miles usually doesn't impact your port. In other words, there's the competition.
I'm talking about traffic on the river.
Oh, there'd be a lot. There would be a lot. But it'll, just think all those, every one of those, if a barge holds 20 containers, you got 6 barges, that's a lot of trucks you're taking off the highway. It's a lot of air pollution, wear and tear on interstates. We hope the industry nationwide goes to container on barge a lot more than it is. Folks are trying.
What sort of products did you put in containers on barges?
What we're doing now out of Shreveport is oil's going down. Genesis is going down. They're bringing in frac sand. They're bringing in steel coils. There's a company in Texas, they were bringing their stuff to Houston on boats and railing it to their place just west of Lufkin, that area. They were tired of dealing with Houston and the railroads. Their trucks would have to wait. They're coming to Shreveport, and they've got 10 trucks dedicated to make 2 trips a day from the port of Shreveport. So much easier for them to deal with. They don't have to deal with Houston traffic or anything like that. So and there's some sand and gravel south of us, Clico, coal. Okay. One more.
I was curious as to how residential building permits were issued to build on the riverside.
Well, we have floodplain managers on the parishes of the 2 cities. And if you build to what's called the base flood elevation or higher, you're probably pretty good because that's what FEMA says is the 100-year flood. The problem is those hadn't been updated in a long time. They hadn't considered all the stuff that's happened, the lock and dams. It was before the lock and dams. So basically, the BFEs were not correct. But there are floodplain managers designated to control that, what gets built.
Thank you. Thank you, Rich. For doing this, you get a power bank to charge your cell phone up as you're traveling, and it goes dead.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you very much. Thank you. In addition, this month we are recognizing volunteers for youth justice who provide advocacy, life skill training, and mentoring experiences for abused, neglected, and at-risk children throughout Northwest Louisiana. We have drawings. I grabbed some tickets quickly.